The Kingdom of Glass Clocks. 6. Illusions the ego uses to trap you. The clocks are lying to you. They say time is the great healer, but what if I told you time is the wound? Imagine a kingdom built entirely of glass clocks. Every wall ticks. Every breath syncs with a schedule. Every citizen smiles on time, works on time, even cries on time. It's orderly. It's perfect. It's dead. This is the world of the ego, the psychological machine Carl Jung warned us about. A world where your thoughts, your desires, your pain, even your sense of identity are orchestrated like gears in a watch, smooth, predictable, lifeless. In this world, you think you're evolving. You read books, you chase goals, you try to work on yourself, but you're not changing. You're rotating, like a hamster on a wheel made of crystal, beautiful, transparent, and utterly pointless. The ego doesn't want freedom. It wants rhythm. It builds clocks out of your habits, your wounds, your personas, so you never escape. And here's the twist. The ego doesn't yell. It whispers in logic. It cloaks its control in language like discipline, consistency, achievement. It dresses tyranny in the clothes of virtue, and you applaud your own imprisonment. Jung called it the trap of the false self, the constructed identity that mimics truth, but fears transformation. It's the mask that's worn so long, you've forgotten there's a face beneath it. The performance that's played so well, you think it's who you are. If you're watching this, you're already hearing the cracks. The tick is getting louder, the glass is starting to splinter. And somewhere, something ancient in you is asking, is this all there is? Is this mechanical existence, this scheduled happiness, this measured worth, really life? In this video, we're going to tear through the gears. I'll reveal 6 illusions, 6 mechanisms inside the kingdom of glass clocks. Each one disguises itself as strength, as wisdom, as progress. But in truth, they're elegant traps built by your ego to keep the self locked away. This is not a video for comfort. This is a rebellion against every voice in your head that told you to stay on schedule, against every mirror that showed you who you should be instead of who you are. The clocks are lying to you. Let's break them. Chapter 1. The timer that never stops. What if your addiction to productivity is just the ego's way of keeping you too busy to wake up? There's a timer inside you, always ticking, always pushing, always reminding you that if you're not doing, you're failing. You don't rest. You recharge just enough to keep running. You don't pause. You panic at the thought of stillness. You don't breathe. You gasp between tasks. And the worst part? You think this is ambition. You call it drive. You label it success. But what if it's a trap? In the kingdom of glass clocks, there's one device placed in every citizen's chest, a small golden timer. It's surgically inserted at birth, they say, though no one remembers the operation. It resets every morning at dawn. From that moment, it starts counting down. If you don't produce something, an achievement, a task, a performance, by nightfall, the timer emits a soft buzz of shame. No guards, no whips, no punishment from outside, just that gentle sting of not enough that radiates from within. People learn quickly to fear silence more than failure, to dread stillness more than death. This is the ego's first illusion. Productivity equals purpose. And it sounds noble. It sounds evolved. Until you realize you've never actually asked, why am I running? You've never questioned the race itself, only whether you're winning. Take James, a 37-year-old creative director. Every day was a checklist: pitch decks, client calls, gym sessions, social posts, networking events, side projects. He wore his exhaustion like a badge, his burnout like a medal of honor. "I'll sleep when I'm dead," he'd joke, not realizing he was already halfway there. Then one day, a citywide blackout shut everything down. No internet, no deadlines, no noise, no escape. And in that stillness, James felt something terrifying. Nothing. No identity, no inner compass, no sense of self beyond his output. Just a hum of anxiety, like static from a broken radio. He hadn't been living. He'd been buffering. He'd been a human loading screen, forever at 99%, never complete. What Jung understood is that the ego equates silence with death. Why? Because in silence, the ego loses its mirrors. It can't perform. It can't measure. It can't compare. And in that void, something else begins to whisper. something the ego has spent your entire life trying to drown out. Jung saw individuation not as achievement, but as surrender, the sacred art of letting go of motion so your soul can emerge. So ask yourself, have you ever felt guilty for doing nothing? Do you sabotage calm by injecting noise, scrolling, cleaning, texting, planning, just to avoid stillness? Have you ever been on vacation and felt more anxious than at work? What if your need to keep moving isn't about passion, but avoidance? What if you're not running towards something, but away from something? And what if the timer inside you isn't real at all? What if it's just an antique machine built by voices long gone, parents who feared poverty, teachers who preach competition, society that worships the busy, all whispering, don't stop, don't think, don't feel, don't be. But here's the twist. When you finally let the timer tick to zero, nothing bad happens. The glass doesn't shatter, the sky doesn't fall, the world doesn't end. Something softer arrives instead. Stillness, presence, awareness. The realization that you were never the timer, you were the one watching it tick. But this is only the first illusion. The ego doesn't just trap you in movement. It also wraps your identity in numbers, praise, and metrics you never agreed to. Chapter 2. The Measuring String. If you stripped away your titles, your followers, your income, would you still recognize yourself in the mirror? Most wouldn't. Because in the kingdom of glass clocks, every citizen wears a translucent string around their neck. It glows when praised. It tightens when ignored. It pulses with every comparison, brightens with every achievement, dims with every failure. No one knows who first tied it there, but everyone learns quickly. Your worth depends on how long that string shines. This is the ego's second illusion. Your value can be measured by applause, by promotions, by likes, shares, revenue, rankings, by how many people say you're amazing and how loudly they say it. It doesn't even matter what they admire, only that they do. The ego doesn't care about authenticity. It wants validation, and when it gets it, the string relaxes, just enough to let you breathe, but never fully, never completely. Sarah was a teacher-turned-entrepreneur who built a massive personal brand on empowering others. Her content was flawless, her message clean, her image polished to perfection. Hundreds of thousands hung on her every word. But every night, she obsessively refreshed analytics, fixating on likes, reach, conversion rates, engagement metrics. If the numbers dipped, so did her spirit. If comments turned critical, she'd lose sleep rewriting responses in her head. And one evening, when her biggest launch flopped, when months of work resulted in crickets and refunds, she didn't just feel disappointment. She felt erasure, as if she had disappeared, as if, without the glow of validation, she ceased to exist. Because when the measuring string tightens, it doesn't just cut off air, it cuts off identity. Jung would call this over-identification with the persona. When who you are gets fused with how you're perceived, the self has no room to breathe. You become a performance in a hall of reflections, each mirror showing a different angle of the same prison. We've all felt it, that invisible anxiety when no one replies to your message, that sting when your work goes unnoticed, that surge of life when someone says, "You're amazing," and the subtle despair when they don't say it again, that constant, exhausting calculation. Am I enough? Am I seen? Am I worthy? But what if this entire system is built on a lie? What if the string doesn't measure your soul, but your compliance? What if your true worth isn't visible at all, because it's not supposed to be measured, only lived? What if value isn't something you earn, but something you are? The most dangerous thing about the measuring string isn't that it chokes you. It's that you begin to love the feeling of almost breathing. It becomes familiar, addictive. You start to believe that the tightness is normal, that the glow is necessary, that without external validation, you're nothing. Have you ever held back your truth because you feared it wouldn't resonate? Have you ever reshaped yourself for metrics, more likable, more marketable, more safe? Have you ever posted something vulnerable, then deleted it when the likes didn't come fast enough? That's not you speaking. That's the clock adjusting your glow. That's the ego tightening the string, reminding you who's in control. But the ego's game isn't finished yet. Because once it's calculated your worth, it builds the next illusion. An archive so detailed, so precise, it turns every wound into a record, every betrayal into a barcode, and every person into a case file. Chapter 3. The Archive of Blame. Have you ever noticed how vividly you remember the people who hurt you, but barely recall the last time you truly trusted? How you can recite, word for word, the cruel things someone said 5 years ago, but struggle to remember yesterday's kindness? That's not coincidence, that's design. In the kingdom of glass clocks, beneath the great central tower, lies the archive of blame, an infinite library of translucent files, each glowing faintly with a timestamp, a wound, a name. The shelves stretch beyond sight, organized by year, by pain level, by betrayal type. Every citizen contributes to it, daily, quietly, relentlessly. Some files are thick as encyclopedias, others just a single page, but all are preserved in crystal clarity. This is the ego's third illusion. Pain is proof. It believes every betrayal, every rejection, every slight must be documented, cataloged, and revisited, because if it can keep the story alive, it can stay in control. If it can replay the injury, it never has to risk healing. Imagine a man who remembers exactly what his ex said 7 years ago, the exact tone, the exact words, the exact way the light hit her face when she said, "You're not enough." Not because he's dramatic, but because the ego needs evidence. It turns trauma into timestamps. It converts wounds into weapons. It doesn't want healing, it wants order. It wants to file away. See, this is why we don't trust. This is why we stay closed. Jung saw this clearly. The ego doesn't store memories like a soul. It stores them like a prosecutor building a case. The goal isn't resolution. It's preservation of identity. "Look what they did to me" becomes the cornerstone of "this is who I am." And if the file is ever lost, if the story is ever released, who will you be? Amir, a 44-year-old father, kept his emotions sealed like bank vaults. His wife called him distant. His kids called him cold. His friends called him strong. But in therapy, after months of resistance, he finally spoke of a single phrase his mother once said when he was 7. "Real men don't cry." Just 4 words, spoken once. Maybe forgotten by her within minutes. But his ego filed them under "Never Show Weakness," page 1, paragraph 1. And from that single page, he wrote decades of isolation, decades of teaching his own son the same suffocating lesson. Have you done the same? Have you turned a moment of pain into a lifelong personality? Have you let a single rejection write the rules for every relationship that followed? Because here's the trap. The longer you revisit the archive, the more sacred it becomes. You confuse the file with your flesh, the story with your soul. And one day, someone will try to love you, but have to walk through shelves of dust and glass just to reach your heartbeat. They'll have to navigate around files marked "Do Not Trust" and "Remember what happened last time," just to hold your hand. What the ego doesn't tell you is that you can burn the archive, not out of denial, but out of freedom. Not because the pain didn't happen, but because you're not a museum. You're a living being. Not everything needs to be remembered. Some things need to be released without ceremony. Some stories need to end mid-sentence. What if your story doesn't need one more chapter of evidence, but a blank page? What if forgiveness isn't about them, but about freeing up space in your archive for something other than pain? But of course, the ego won't let go that easily. If it can't trap you in pain, it will trap you in responsibility. It will convince you that you're not just part of the system, you are the system. And without you, everything will collapse. Chapter 4. The cog that thinks it's the clock. What if the reason you're exhausted isn't because you're doing too much, but because you believe you're holding everything together? In the heart of the kingdom of glass clocks, there's a cog, small, polished, essential, or so it believes. It turns day and night, prideful in its rhythm, convinced that its rotation keeps the entire kingdom alive. It whispers to itself, "If I stop, time stops. If I rest, chaos reigns." But what it never notices is that the rest of the system has long moved on. It's spinning for a machine that no longer exists. Its grooves have worn smooth. Its purpose has evolved past it. Yet still, it turns. This is the ego's fourth illusion. If I stop, everything breaks. It convinces you that you are indispensable, central, irreplaceable, not because it's true, but because ego feeds on significance. It would rather see you collapse from importance than thrive in simplicity. It doesn't matter if you're dying inside. As long as you're needed, the clock keeps turning. Maria was the backbone of her family. Organizer, peacemaker, financial planner, emotional sponge, memory keeper, tradition holder. She remembered every birthday, mediated every conflict, anticipated every need before it was spoken. She never said no, because in her mind, no one else could. They need me, she'd tell herself at 2 a.m., answering work emails while planning her daughter's school event, while checking on her aging mother. But one day, while lying in a hospital bed after collapsing from exhaustion, her body finally rebelling against years of override, she looked around and realized something chilling. Life went on. Her children adapted, her partner figured things out, her workplace functioned, her mother made new friends. The world didn't end when she stopped. It just adjusted, it evolved, it found new rhythms. The ego doesn't prepare you for this. It tells you, without you, they'll fall apart. It shows you visions of chaos, of failure, of everything crumbling. But the deeper truth is this. Sometimes the world has already adjusted, and you're just the last one clinging to the illusion of control. Sometimes you're not holding things together. You're holding things back. Jung warned that over-identification with the hero role is a trap. When we fuse with responsibility, we lose the self. Because the self isn't here to maintain systems. It's here to evolve beyond them. It's here to dance, not just to hold the dance floor together. Ask yourself, are you truly supporting others, or are you creating dependencies that validate your importance? Are you helping out of love, or fear of becoming irrelevant? Do you give others space to grow, or do you fill every space so they never have to? When Maria finally returned home, something had shifted. Her family had discovered strengths she'd never allowed them to develop. Her daughter had learned to organize. Her partner had learned to listen. Her mother had learned to ask neighbors for help. And Maria, she learned the hardest lesson of all. Love doesn't mean being everything to everyone. Sometimes love means stepping back so others can step forward. You don't have to be the center of the wheel to be of value. Sometimes letting the system rebalance is the greatest gift you can offer. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is trust others with their own growth. But when the ego realizes it's no longer the system, it panics. It starts reaching for something else to control. And if it can't run the machine, it will settle for mastering the map, even if that map leads nowhere. Chapter 5, The Map with No Territory. What if all your knowledge, all your reading, all your inner work is just a prettier way of standing still? In a hidden chamber of the kingdom of glass clocks lies a vault, lined wall to wall with golden maps. Every path is detailed, every route measured, every danger anticipated with scholarly precision. The maps are beautiful, intricate, annotated with wisdom from ages past, philosophers' routes, mystics' shortcuts, healers' highways. But there's one strange thing. No one has ever stepped outside to test them. The door to the actual territory remains locked, by choice. This is the ego's fifth illusion. Studying transformation is the same as experiencing it. It confuses insight with evolution. It mistakes understanding for embodiment. It collects quotes like weapons, teachings like trophies, wisdom like wallpaper, but refuses to bleed. It knows every forest trail by heart, but never walks barefoot. It can describe the ocean's depth, but won't get wet. Alex prided himself on his awakening. He'd read Jung, Gurdjieff, Campbell, even ancient Taoist scrolls. His shelves were temples. His speech, impressive. He could quote the Tao Te Ching in 3 translations. He knew the hero's journey by heart. He understood shadow work, inner child healing, attachment theory. Friends called him wise. Strangers called him teacher. But when his partner left, accusing him of emotional distance, of being all head, no heart, all his theories failed him. Not because they were wrong, but because he'd never integrated them. He could speak fluently about vulnerability, but had never been vulnerable. He could lecture on presence, but was never present. He was fluent in maps, illiterate in terrain. A scholar of love who'd never risked loving. Jung never romanticized knowledge. He saw it as a doorway, not a destination. And he warned, the ego is crafty. It will use even spirituality as armor. It would rather appear enlightened than actually dissolve. It would rather be right about transformation than transformed. Have you ever told yourself you were growing, but deep down, you were just reorganizing your fears into prettier categories? Have you used self-help as a shield from self-confrontation? Have you hidden behind wisdom to avoid feeling foolish? Have you collected teachings like merit badges while your heart remained exactly where it started? The map is safe. The territory is not. The map flatters your mind. The territory humbles your being. The map lets you feel superior. The territory makes you feel small. The map promises control. The territory promises only truth. I once met a woman who'd attended every workshop, read every book, followed every guru. She knew the language of healing inside out. But when I asked her, "When did you last cry?" she couldn't remember. When I asked, "What scares you?" she had rehearsed answers, but no real feeling. She'd become a museum of wisdom, not a living being. And while the ego decorates its world with diagrams, theories, and certificates of understanding, the self waits in the wild, beneath the trees, under the storms, inside the wound. It doesn't care about your library. It cares about your willingness to get lost. But if you ever dare to burn the maps, if you ever whisper, "I don't know," and mean it, you'll feel something the ego can't survive. Aliveness. Raw, uncertain, uncharted aliveness. Yet even then, the ego has one final trap, one last gear. It knows how to mimic progress so perfectly that you'll think you've changed, while looping endlessly through the same beginning. Chapter 6. The Clock That Loops at Midnight. There's a clock in the town square. It's the largest, most sacred mechanism in the entire kingdom of glass clocks. Its face is made of pure crystal, its hands carved from light itself. People gather at dusk to watch it count down to midnight, where a new day should begin. The crowd holds its breath. The seconds tick. 11:58. 11:59. The anticipation builds. But it never strikes 12. Just as the final hand is about to complete its journey, it resets to 11:59. Again and again. A perfect illusion of progress. A ritual of almost change. And the crowd, instead of protesting, celebrates. Almost, they cheer. So close, they encourage. As if the nearness to transformation is transformation itself. This is the ego's sixth illusion. You're evolving, when really you're rehearsing. You loop the same healing, the same realization, the same breakthrough so many times. You convince yourself it's growth. But it's only familiarity with the threshold, never crossing it. Jasmine was a personal development veteran. Vision boards wallpapered her apartment. Meditation apps filled her phone. She'd done the plant medicine ceremonies, the breathwork intensives, the shadow work journals. She could articulate every root cause of her wounds with surgical precision. She knew her attachment style, her enneagram, her human design, her childhood trauma patterns. But after 5 years, her therapist said something that shattered her performance. You've mastered naming your pain. You've become an expert in your problems. But you've never allowed them to transform you. You're in love with the edge of change, but terrified of the fall. That's the 11:59 trap. The ego allows just enough insight to prevent collapse, but not enough surrender to allow rebirth. It loops you through the comfort of awareness, while avoiding the terror of integration. Because real change means something must die, a version of you, an identity, a story, a kingdom. Jung described this moment as the true threshold of individuation, not a peak of knowledge, but a collapse of false self, not adding more, but losing what you thought was essential, a death that births mystery. I've seen it countless times, people who've been healing for decades but never healed, who've been working on themselves but never changed, who know every reason why they're stuck but won't take the single step that would free them. They're professional almost transformers, experts at the edge. So, have you been dancing at the edge of midnight, celebrating the light show, quoting transformation, feeling the adrenaline of almost, while never letting the new day begin? Have you been so mesmerized by the approach that you've forgotten the arrival? What would happen if, for once, the clock didn't reset? What if you let midnight strike? What if you stopped applauding the nearness and demanded the newness? Here, in this final room of the kingdom, something shifts. The ticking has stopped. The gears have slowed. The mirrors are gone. The string around your neck has loosened. The timer in your chest has gone quiet. And silence finally settles, not as emptiness, but as space. Space for something deeper, wilder, unknown. Space for what Jung called the self. Not the constructed you, but the eternal you. Space for midnight to finally arrive. But we're not done yet, because now that the illusions have cracked, there's one final message you need to hear. Not from me, but from the timekeeper you silenced long ago, the self that's been waiting behind the glass. Call to action. You were never the clock. You've just walked through the 6 great illusions of the kingdom of glass clocks. You've seen how the ego builds its empire, not with malice, but with precision. with timers that keep you running nowhere, strings that measure your worth in applause, archives that preserve your wounds like trophies, roles that demand your sacrifice at the altar of necessity, maps that replace your footsteps with theories, and clocks that trick you into circling the same sunrise forever, mistaking repetition for growth. But here's the truth Jung knew, and few dare to face. The ego doesn't die with violence. It dies with surrender. It doesn't scream when it's unraveling. It whispers, "Please don't let go." It doesn't fight with swords. It pleads with logic, "But who will you be without me?" And now, if you've truly heard these words, you've begun to let go. The timer is slowing. The string is loosening. The archive is gathering dust. The cog is learning to rest. The maps are burning. The clock has finally struck midnight. So I ask you, and this is not a rhetorical question, which illusion held you the longest? Which room in this kingdom felt like home, and which one finally cracked? Was it the timer that kept you running from yourself? The string that made you a slave to others' eyes? The archive that turned you into a museum of pain? Drop it in the comments, not just for you, but for the ones still trapped in glass, waiting to see their own reflection in your truth. Your story might be the key that unlocks someone else's prison. If this journey stirred something deep inside you, if you felt the glass crack, if you heard the self-whisper, subscribe. Because this channel isn't built on content, it's built on initiations. Every video is a doorway, every insight an invitation to drop the mask. Here, we don't just talk about the self, we walk toward it, barefoot, through silence and through story. We don't just study transformation, we risk it. Share this with someone who's been running too long, someone whose string is too tight, someone who needs to hear that they were never meant to be a clock. And remember, let this sink into your bones. You were never the cog spinning for approval, never the archive storing yesterday's pain, never the timer racing against yourself, never the string glowing for applause, never the map avoiding the territory, never even the clock pretending to change. You were always the consciousness witnessing it all. You were always the silence between the ticks. You were always the timeless awareness that needs no schedule. You were always the self that Jung spent his life pointing toward. The kingdom of glass clocks was never your home. You are.